I wish you would go out on a date with me. I'm doubling my efforts to get you to go out with me. Why am I telling Irish pickup lines, you might be wondering, eighth grade? Well, it's because in today's lesson, we are going to be learning about immigration from Europe, many of whom were Irish immigrants who came over during a period called the Irish Potato Famine in the middle of the 19th century. Uh, that is when my Irish ancestors, or at least many of them, came over to the United States. So, thanks to the Irish potato famine, you have me, Mr. Bruce, as your teacher. So, there you go. Good things can come from terrible tragedies. Okay, we need to pick up, though, on technology, and then we'll move into immigration. So the last video was talking about developments in technology. And when you're thinking about the Industrial Revolution, I want you to kind of have a pros and cons list going in your head. Because a lot of times people will tell you that the Industrial Revolution was this terrible thing because of child labor and because a lot of people were underpaid and exploited by greedy capitalists and factory owners. They'll talk about like terrible damage that was done to the economy or to the environment because of it. They'll talk about fires that killed a lot of factory workers. And it's true, there are a lot of really terrible things that were going on in the Industrial Revolution. But to paint it as all bad is dramatically oversimplifying it. Likewise, there's a lot of people who ignore all that bad stuff and say the American Industrial Revolution was this amazing, great thing that happened um, because it raised the standard of living for a lot of Americans in the United States. And that's true, it did, right? It made goods more widely available and less expensive. And this overall had the effect of um, dramatically improving the lives of the average American. However, this came at a terrible cost, right? The cost of decades of child labor and more than 1 million children working 8 to 16 hour days for basically their entire childhood. So the cost of the Industrial Revolution is quite severe, even if its benefits were really great for our country. All right, so again, think of pros and cons when you're thinking of the Industrial Revolution. And then you can form your own opinion as to whether or not it was overall a good thing or a bad thing. One of the good things, though, that came from it, definitely, as I said last time, were developments in technology. So I talked about the telegraph in the last video, as well as the thresher. Telegraph made communication much, much faster. The agricultural inventions by Cyrus McCormick, the reaper and the thresher, dramatically increased the ability of farmers to grow and produce wheat. And wheat, as we know, is used to make flour, which is fundamental for bread and bread products. So these agricultural developments had a major role in ending malnourishment in the United States. Right? So even as early as the Industrial Revolution, it was pretty rare to find people in the United States who were dying of starvation. Right? Starvation is a problem that this country has not seen in a really long time, and that is largely because of the reaper and the thresher. Another invention is occurred in the field of manufacturing. So we've already talked about a lot of machines that were developed in factories. One of the most important machines developed in the factories, though, was the sewing machine, right? So the sewing machine was invented by basically a combination of two different inventors who really didn't have any connection with one another. Elias Howe and Isaac Singer together invented what would become the sewing machine, which made clothing a lot more available and a lot less expensive. So even poor people could be well clothed. And again, this has been true in the United States for much of its history. If you live in an urban area, there's a good chance you have access to relatively decent clothing for next to nothing. So, for example, the dress pants that I wear to school every day, right? They're not expensive at all. In fact, because you guys know I like to go to the clearance rack at Kohl's, I get a lot of my clothing from the clearance rack at Kohl's, clothing that I wear to school almost every day. Or, I rotate, but the pants and the shirts that you guys are used to seeing me wear in the classroom, um, they're not like $100. They're not even $50, right? I have a pair of pants that I wear that cost $2.80. Right? Now, part of that is because I am a excellent bargain shopper, and I kind of have a unique uh, pant size in terms of my waist and the length of the legs. But um, yeah, the fact that I was able to get a pair of pants that I could actually wear to work that cost $2.80 is possible largely because of the Industrial Revolution and capitalism, right? Okay, there are other developments in transportation. So I'm on slide 11, the one with Thomas the Train. Um, so improvements in transportation make it easier for factories to acquire the raw materials they need in order to produce their products, and also make it easier for these factories to ship their products to markets that are far away. Right. So this is the transportation revolution is part of the industrial revolution, and it's part of the reason that people in St. Louis, Missouri could get a belt that is made in Georgia and a hat that is manufactured in New York and a shirt that is manufactured in Philadelphia, right? It's because factories that produce these things have access to transportation that allows them to ship their goods to towns and cities all over the country. So, one of these developments were the steamboat and the clipper. So, the steamboat is a freshwater boat, and the clipper is a small ship that can sail in relatively shallow ocean water. So, along the eastern seaboard, you would see a lot of clippers. And these are primarily for transferring goods over water in short periods of time. Right? So the steamboat is a useful development. The problem with the steamboat is you can't take it out on the ocean, and fresh water will freeze. Right? So a steamboat can only operate as long as there's running water. Right? During the winter, you're probably not going to be able to ship goods via steamboat. Clippers, however, can travel on ocean water. Right? Clippers, unlike steamboats, can handle ocean currents and waves and things like that. And as you guys know, the ocean doesn't actually freeze unless you're near the North or South Pole, or like up in parts of the Arctic North, Canada and Russia and Greenland and places like that. Right? Ocean water doesn't freeze. So clippers could transport goods 365 days a year. Perhaps the biggest transportation development, however, was the arrival of railroads in the United States, because unlike steamboats and clippers, you don't require bodies of water for railroads. Also, railroads, unlike roads, can be built almost anywhere. If you want to build a road through a mountain pass, that is a massive undertaking. Right? You have to demolish parts of the mountain and clear away huge amounts of rock and turf. And, mountains are almost impossible to build roads through. However, because railroads don't require a lot of flat ground, it was quite common to build railroads through mountain passes. Right? So railroads can be built almost anywhere and in basically any weather condition. So railroads make the transportation of people as well as goods a lot faster and a lot less expensive. All right, now immigration. So in the 1840s, the population of the United States explodes. And this is mostly due to European immigration. Now, in Europe at this time, there are two major things that are happening that are causing people from Europe to flee to the United States for a better life. Number one, in 1845, there was a fungus in Ireland that destroyed its potato crop. And this led to an event called the Irish potato famine. So there's this fungus that started to grow on potatoes, and it would eat the potatoes and cause them to rot. And Irish people relied on potatoes as part of their diet, especially the poor. Poor Irish people relied heavily on potatoes in order to survive. And in 1845, the potato crop failed, and this caused more than 1 million Irish people to starve to death. Right, just to put that in perspective, in the United States right now, at the time that I'm making this video, it's projected that we're going to have about 80,000, maybe 90,000 people die from the coronavirus by August. Right? Multiply that by like 11, 12, 13, and you have an idea of how devastating the Irish potato famine was to Ireland. Right? It's more than tenfold as extreme as the COVID-19 virus. Right? And we're not worried about starving to death because of the COVID-19 virus. We're worried about other things, but not starvation. Well, in Ireland, they were very worried about starvation, so they fled to the United States. Meanwhile, in Germany, there was a lot of political unrest, and a lot of Germans started to revolt and rebel against local political authorities. Now, unlike the United States, almost all of these revolutions failed. And when a revolution fails, the people who participate in the revolution need to run away as fast as they can, because revolutionaries are punished, imprisoned, and executed. They're made examples out of, right? I just ended a sentence in a preposition, I'm sorry. They would make an example out of a revolutionary by punishing them severely. So all these failed revolutionaries had to run away as fast as they could, and the best place, the safest place they could escape to was the United States, where no one knew who they were. Right? Now, a big difference between the Irish and German immigrants is the Irish immigrants to the United States were people who relied on potatoes for survival. These were almost exclusively all poor people. Germans, however, was a combination of wealthy and poor people. Many of the German revolutionaries were highly educated. That's why they were inspired to rebel, right? So some of them were poor, but some of them were quite wealthy and educated. So when Germans and Irish fled to the United States, a lot of Americans were not happy about this wave of immigration. But between the Irish and the Germans, who do you think they favored? They favored the Germans, right? Because the Germans were more likely to be wealthy and educated. Another reason they favored the Germans is because the Irish were Catholics, and the United States was a Protestant country at this time. Germany had been Protestant for centuries. Ireland had been Catholic for centuries. So Germans were treated much better in the United States than the Irish were. All right, I'm going to stop here. In the next video, I'm going to talk more about immigration and discrimination in the North and the South.